This is the Fixer Punk Podcast. I'm Grayson Peltier. This is the podcast where we bridge the divide between personal and social change and deal with all the things when the political becomes personal and the personal becomes political. And a very key example of this has gotten to the news recently with the Liver King being exposed as having used performance-enhancing drugs. He is one of many influencers out there who has this sort of ancestral idea of fitness and health and is showing off very, very substantial masculinity. He's very focused on young men and helping young men that are supposedly being emasculated or not feeling as masculine as they could through fitness, and then through promoting a sort of naturalistic idea around it. The reason why he's called Liver King is because he promotes eating raw organ meats as a way of improving one's health and fitness, and obviously the aesthetic appearance of their physique. When in fact he was using very large quantities of steroids and performance-enhancing drugs to achieve that physique. And this type of idea has been trending very, very hard into the realm of right-wing and alt-right ideology. Unfortunately, this isn't just somebody who's going out and saying, oh yeah, just go and eat raw organ meats, as dangerous to public health as that could be because of the fact that they're not cooked and you could get food poisoning. But also promoting this idea that men back in a certain time were more masculine or more manly. There were these Vikings and these kings and these strong men of old who you should really be as a young man. If you're feeling weaker or less than, you should be aiming to be like them by following all of my principles. There are a lot of people who are doing that. He wasn't as overtly political as other people, but he was trending in this direction, which is a naturalistic bias for sure. There's also, along the same lines, there's a pretty good article from a website called Unheard that I read about this. And my interest in this area really is finding a way to not bring young men toward these hateful ideologies, because even though Liver King wasn't explicit about it, what this tends to do is it tends to bring young men toward the alt-right and believing even more specifically into misogyny and other hateful ideologies by promoting this extremely traditionalist way of living that sees modernity very broadly as being an enemy. It's an enemy to you in terms of modern life making you less fit and less healthy, but it's also a threat to you because the gays and the left are weakening your mind and forcing you to be soft because you have to now be kind and considerate to women and you have to see them as equals. Then that makes you a weaker and softer man. And they go after these young men who are really dejected and feeling down in life. And then these fitness ideas they bring out come packaged with these other things. And there are more explicit forms of it too. There's Mike Cernovich, who put out a book called The MAGA Mindset. Obviously, MAGA refers to Make America Great Again. There's somebody who refers to himself as the raw egg nationalist. People that are promoting the consumption of raw meats specifically as a way for men to regain their masculinity, are basically selling it along as a package with ideas of let's say no to all of modern society, really, and all of the advancements that have been made in civil rights and women's rights and LGBTQ rights, and saying that narrative is causing men to feel weak. And the reason why not only you're out of shape, but you're feeling all sad and you don't have opportunity in your life economically. And that's an interesting thing that I've been seeing as well, as a lot of fitness influencers are also getting into the finance world and giving people advice there. I don't think Liver King got as much into that, but it is a trend in this area that is growing. And it's not because of capitalism. The reason why you're not healthy isn't because your job isn't paying you well, because the workers don't have enough power and union rights aren't as strong as they should be. No, it's because we've lost our sense of traditionalism. And of course, this traditionalism comes packaged with all of these racist, sexist ideas. And this is concerning not just the first part is obviously because some of this stuff is fitness misinformation and it skews body image. You have a guy like him with a very low body fat percentage, looks very, very developed, a larger amount of lean muscle mass than you'd expect for somebody naturally, because obviously he wasn't natural, he was doing steroids. And telling young men that they could do these things, they could get to that point by following his principles, by creating this lofty exemplar and not even being honest about it. And it can cause, when somebody goes out and tries this approach and subjects themselves to it and they don't get those results, then that can be a self-esteem issue. But then it also spreads to the systemic, because if everybody's going around there, or not everybody, but a bunch of people in our society are going around thinking, okay, the solution to these problems, the solution to this mental health crisis, the solution to this economic crisis, which Liver King did actually when he went on TMZ Live, he was talking about how he was citing a lot of statistics that went to population level issues of health, people living paycheck to paycheck. And it's not because you're not eating organ meats that's happening. That's because the minimum wage is too low, because workers don't have enough power, because unions have declined, and you're ascribing these societal problems, including obesity, because obesity is a systemic issue. People aren't just obese because they don't eat right. It's because of all kinds of other systemic factors that also play into this as well, that reduce access to food. Nevertheless, leaving aside eating raw meat, being able to access foods that are healthier at a price that people can afford certainly is becoming an issue now. And people are wondering, I can't get these results that Liver King does, even though I'm doing all the things he's saying. And then they keep going down the rabbit hole, not realizing the systemic problems and the systemic failures and the actual causes of their problem, not realizing that it's the drain of their job, the lack of resources. And then they are just feeding into that by buying his supplements, of course. Everybody, and this is an important thing, because I spent many years working for conservatives, doing communications work. I was even a board member of Tea Party Youth. I left just as Trump was taking office, and I saw that, unfortunately, they were devolving into really, really intolerant ideologies and ideas that promote racism and fascism and anti-democracy ideas. And the thing with conservatives is they always have a way to profit off of it, and they always have like a business to it. Like every single time, dating back to when I started listening to conservative talk radio back in 2009, and this is a very important lesson for progressives to learn. For progressives need to find a way to have a sort of business ecosystem around them that can support their media, because this guy was making money off of his supplements. Alex Jones made money off of supplements too. Even though the few progressive voices that are in this fitness space, they're not necessarily making money off of it. There are people online, like I mentioned, a very minor influencer on Instagram about 3 or 4 episodes ago, who was promoting this very traditionalistic way of like, live this traditional life and everything in your life will get better if you become more traditionalist. They're doing coaching and all that. So we have to promote an entrepreneurship ecosystem, and I believe that the left can win on this issue, which I'll get to that sooner. I'll get to the solutions part of this. But to discuss a little bit more of this particular approach that Liver King is promoting, he promotes 8 principles, or actually no, 9 principles, or what he'd call ancestral tenets. And some of these things will work. That's the thing about all kinds of conservative self-help, whether we're talking about this guy or whether we're talking about Dave Ramsey helping people with debt. Conservative self-help, some of it works. Some of it can become very destructive at some point, but that's going to be down the line, and only a fraction of people kind of notice or realize what's happening to them and their loss of ability to engage with systems, the blaming themselves, the self-pity, that comes later. But some of these things make sense. Some of them are nonsense, but some of them make sense. I'm looking at an article breaking them down here. But number 1 is to sleep adequately, which that's not really disputable. Number 2 is eat like a feral beast, which means a lot of raw meat. Obviously, protein consumption in general is going to benefit you building muscle and all kinds of other things. But he's also claiming that the raw organ meats specifically help with certain nutrients. And that's a bit questionable as to how it's going to affect you, whether it's going to increase your testosterone. It's probably not going to, from what I've seen. But again, like I said earlier on, you have the risk of getting pretty bad food poisoning from eating raw meat. It goes against all of the standards of food safety and hygiene to just start eating raw meat. And of course, you don't have to necessarily eat raw meat, according to him, or at least he'd imply that if you take his supplements. And most people, being reasonable people, are like, okay, I can't eat all that raw meat. Maybe I should just take this supplement. And that's how he makes money. Tenet number 3, walk and lift heavy stuff. Not much to disagree from here. Heavy resistance training obviously will build muscle, increase longevity. Walking's a good form of cardio. Number 4 is shield yourself from radiation and toxins. This goes into the sort of like, again, the naturalistic bias. Just because something's natural doesn't mean it's good for you. And just because something's unnatural doesn't mean it's bad for you. There's a long discussion to be had about what is a toxin, radiation harm. A lot of it is overblown by these influencers. But there is sort of this like secret language, and in all conservative rhetoric, what I learned in my time working for conservatives is it all has its own system, its own code, its own set of principles, its own science that is separate from science. Alternative facts is a pretty good way of putting it. But it operates separately from what is considered to be reasonable, acceptable evidence-based practice. So they're going to be like, okay, you have to eliminate all these toxins. And even back then, 2009, 2012, on conservative talk radio, you'd hear people talking about toxins and cleanses and all this stuff. Meanwhile, they're promoting increases in uses of fossil fuel. Kind of suspicious. But needless to say, that tenet is maybe a little bit questionable, although I can agree on certain things related to toxic exposures and being careful around those things, but might be a little overblown. Tenet number 5, connect with nature. He's saying to earth yourself, which is to like put your feet against like the ground, but not like concrete, like dirt or something like that. And that's also somewhat questionable pseudoscience. Doesn't seem terribly harmful, though. There is a little bit of evidence for it, though. It may not be, again, these are all things that they add and layer all this stuff on top of it. Lifting weights and eating protein is probably going to change your physique over time. Obviously not like you're taking steroids, and getting enough sleep and just being out in nature, not necessarily earthing yourself to the ground, is going to help you. But of course they make it, they add to the mystique of the secret science of it all. Number 6, take cold plunges and contrast showers. Cold exposure, there is some research about the benefits of that. I wouldn't say it's for everybody. I'm not necessarily an expert in these things. I'm just going based upon what I've seen. But again, it's stuff that's true. partially. Some of it is true. And that's always what has to happen. When somebody's going to deceive you and trick you into something, part of it has to be true. Some of it has to work, because if somebody went through Liver King's whole program or whatever and it did absolutely nothing, it would fall apart more quickly than if it actually did something or it worked for some percentage of people. Obviously, an optimized, appropriate program that's evidence-based and customized for each individual circumstance, along with systemic interventions to help uplift people, is going to work better. But if the stuff starts to work, then you start to believe in it. Number 7, get some sunlight. Yes, that's pretty obvious advice as long as you're not getting too much of it. Number 8, fight for your life, literally. And he basically wants you, this article explains that he wants you to push yourself and struggle, which includes that cold exposure and fasting and also like combat and fighting, which I appreciate this a lot. As someone who's really into pro wrestling and found that to be a good model for trying to change your own life, I think it's actually, this is a really good thing. Maybe not doing all the extreme stuff with your body if your body is not ready for it, but I definitely agree with that. My personal motto has kind of come from the Being the Elite theme song, which actually turned up as my number 1 Spotify rap song this year. And it's never look back, never say die, always attack with your warrior cry. So it's a good mantra, kind of, as long as if you don't take it to the illogical, unnecessary extremes. But it definitely goes down to that sort of primal need of young men to feel strong, which is really missing in a lot of like the left type ideologies. Men don't feel like they can fight, even though we're not prohibiting you from doing it. We're not saying it's bad. A lot of young men feel like that the left is too soft, too weak, and that natural primal desire, and that's what all this primal stuff goes back to, like that's being suppressed or repressed, and then they wind up going down this rabbit hole because, oh yeah, now I feel like I'm tough, I feel like I'm strong, I feel like I can fight because I'm listening to this guy who says that that's okay, and I'm feeling better than ever because I'm actually getting some exercise, I'm actually eating healthier food and getting sunlight and all of that. And they think, oh yeah, then all this other stuff must be true too. All this other stuff about how gays are bad, how I need to eat raw meat, how I need to take these supplements, all this other stuff. If he's right about these things, then he must be right also about how the politicians, all the left-wing politicians, are making me feel bad and they want my testosterone to go down, and that's why they're doing this stuff for climate change. If you get somebody to believe you on one thing, then it's more likely they'll believe you on other things. And tenet number 9 is to socialize, which obviously that makes sense. It's logical. People need a human connection. So I just want to kind of take you, the reason why I took you through that is to kind of take you through the anatomy of how these things work, is that it's a little bit of good advice, a little bit of bad advice, and then directing them into the belief and saying that it is because of this belief and because of this cohesive and coherent narrative of becoming like an ancient beast who doesn't believe in women's rights and doesn't believe in gay rights and doesn't believe in economic redistribution, certainly doesn't believe in anything like socialism or unionization that would actually help you with the underlying reasons of why you feel so socially and emotionally and disconnected and why you don't have time to do all this stuff. And of course, the nationalism, the racism, the superior white race stuff that comes in. I didn't get too much. I have to probably get more into that MAGA mindset and raw nationalist and try to break down their stuff that's more explicitly political. But suffice to say that this traditionalism, because it goes back to times when democracy really wasn't a thing and people were very tribal and very much into and they were very nationalistic, then they play on that. And of course, then if you think, oh yeah, look, I'm becoming strong, my life's becoming better by following all this advice, then I might as well follow some of this nationalistic advice. And now that I'm strong and tough and I can fight, now let me go and commit a coup attempt at the Capitol. I know in a sentence it's not logical, but in somebody's mind, if somebody gets exposed to the information, they see it, the source is good because it's helping them in some way, and they're more likely to believe the overall narrative itself, even if it is imperfect, which Liver King strategies are imperfect. And of course, you're not going to reach the same heights that he is. And that's the thing, is that, of course, these are hierarchical structures. He's all the way up here on the hierarchy. And the reason why he's succeeding is because of not because of the secret science of his philosophy, but because of the secret of him injecting himself with steroids. And there is sort of really a glorification of this level of like greatness or achievement, really of people who are higher up on a pedestal than you are. And sometimes I saw a Reddit post, somebody saying that sort of glorifying the elites and the oppressors, even of these olden days, because in these olden days, it wasn't like the average working class person. The average working class person may have been a slave. It's not like they were this big, jacked, strong warrior. The people that were the people who were oppressing the other people. And that is something that is very important to realize here, because a lot of us, unfortunately, with the way systems are structured in society, sometimes it feels like I'm going to keep saying this. It kind of became a interesting slogan that I just thought of the other day as I was kind of struggling through my own fitness journey, is you're too broke to be ripped, because getting all that stuff that Liver King did, all that PEDs, they're all expensive. That's going to cost a lot of money. And you're not going to be able to will yourself into it if you don't have the resources. Probably the best thing that will happen to you and what's going to improve your likelihood of being able to achieve that great physique is having the intellectual knowledge of it combined with the physical resources to be able to pursue it. And one other thing to understand about this is that these ideologies are deliberately, because of how kind of ridiculous and crazy their ideas are, that they're not like things that are scalable necessarily, and a lot of them would shock the conscience of a lot of people. They are necessarily very exclusionary because, and the author of that Unheard article called it How to Get Ripped and Alienate People. So it is kind of creating this sort of exclusive, secret, insular group of people that believes in all this ancestral stuff. And the author of that article was saying that the political is getting personal and that people are caring, kind of going into the people are caring too much about themselves and thinking that all of society is broken and to tear it all down, with the political becoming personal. But I think the political is always personal. And the philosophy of this podcast is the political is always personal. Because even when you're going into something that's sort of like not like a big major issue politically, like your fitness and your health and your physique, those are all political and social constructs that are influenced by your environment, because the amount of physique development you're going to have is directly influenced by your financial resources. People who can buy more expensive food will probably get in better shape. People who have time to go to the gym will get in better shape. And that's the thing about left ideologies. When I was on Street Fight Radio, I was discussing this on Street Fight Radio this past weekend, and Brian Quimby actually brought up a really good point, that leftism should be seen as having the goal of getting you to being your best self and getting you to be able to be the best version of yourself, giving you the resources to do that. And that is, and I think that we can actually win here, because these ideas that Liver King has, even if some of them work, they're probably not the ideal fitness approach. And the one thing that I want those of you who are progressive or leftist to really take away from this discussion is to not shy away from this stuff. And also not to oppose it. because I see way too many leftists online, unfortunately, just going out and opposing like, oh yeah, you're getting ripped, you're getting fit, but that's not socially conscious, that's fat phobic, or you have an eating disorder because you're trying to get shredded. No, we need to have it's important to have inclusive communities for people who are from oppressed demographics. But I think that for young men to get involved in leftist ideas, we have to embrace them being able to become the best version of themselves, which for young men is oftentimes going to be involved getting in really good shape and feeling very powerful and strong in life. And that comes from distributing the power to the people in the ways I said and improving their material conditions. And even if these ideas from the Liver King don't work, what's the alternative? What if I'm a young man and my life is broken and in shambles? Where is the alternative to this? Who is going to come in and tell me this is the problem and this is the solution and have it work and not make me feel weak? Because so much of the left stuff is like, you have to get rid of your privilege. You have to get rid of your privilege, and if you're a white man, then you just need to stay down, and you need to stay down. People, which it's true, privilege is real. Privilege is a real problem. We have to deal with it. But you can't get people to agree with you by just telling them how bad they are. And it's not even necessary too much to do that. And then if you see that, you see one side that seems like they hate you, and the right is going to do everything they can to make it look like the left hates young men or men in general. They're going to do that. They're going to put out every single last extreme example of somebody who's on the far, far fringes of the far left saying something stupid. They're going to put that out there. And where is the counter narrative? Where is it? Where are the leftists who are telling you that you can become a strong man and improve your life and also help improve the lives of others while being inclusive to LGBTQ people, while respecting rights for women, while improving the overall economic condition of your community through organizing? And I believe it does exist. And I have seen it happen in my own life as well. Now, I had to find these people through happenstance and a lot of time because unlike on the right, there isn't some quick ecosystem. When I became conservative, I could just listen to one conservative talk radio station, and in a day, I would hear everybody who's giving me advice on health, finance, politics, organizing, community nonprofits, all connected. They have a very, very tight ecosystem, a very well-run machine. By happenstance, I've had to kind of cobble together through social media all the people on the left who are working in those spaces. And the space where, and I've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast, and I talk about it a lot, is where I think that in terms of leftist masculine approaches, where we are approaching mental health, where we're approaching physical health, where we're approaching fitness, where we're approaching physique with the approach of not that you're less than or that you're worse of a person because you're not big, muscular, and have an 8% body fat. But if you want to get to that place, that's completely fine. And here are the solutions. Here's the truth. Here's how you actually get there. Here's what it actually takes. And here's how to do it in an appropriate, proper, and safe way without having to deal with fascists. The place where I see that narrative happening and where I see strong men dealing with and talking about mental health and their struggles and all areas of struggle and triumph is pro wrestling. I've spoken quite a bit about Adam Page. I have a bunch of episodes and articles about Adam Page, the former AEW world champion. And the example he set in terms of fitness with something called the Full Gear Challenge, which he educated about eating disorders and body dysmorphia and the emotional turmoil of all of that, while also encouraging his fans to really get themselves in their best shape, or what he calls the full gear ready shape, which full gear ready means like ready to be in like wrestling gear. So definitely very, very strong look and promoting that, while also talking about issues of body positivity and not beating yourself up so much mentally over your situation. And He's promoting unionization. He's promoting efforts for climate change. He's promoting LGBTQ rights, and meanwhile being a world champion fighter. And then on a less from an exemplar level, a entertainment exemplar level, to a grassroots, or not really grassroots, but like an ecosystem practical perspective. Having actual good evidence-based information on fitness, along with experts who have a more progressive frame of mind and a more progressive set of ideas, is going to be incredibly helpful, because Liver King's ideas are going to fail quite a few people, and quite a few people are just going to be repulsed by the raw meat thing. And a lot of people are not going to want to do that, and a lot of people are going to realize that's nonsense. But if you have, again, you have the tent, you have the big tent there, and you're attracting that with strong men who are like, you can be strong, you can be the toughest fighter possible, you can get to the elite levels of athleticism, you can get to being a world champion wrestler or world champion bodybuilder, and still believe in helping others, and in fact creating a community where others are around you and helping you and being in a collaborative way, instead of a hateful way, instead of believing in hatred toward others, believing in love and respect, that can actually create the ecosystem and the environment for fitness, and showing that, and for success economically, and showing that. Then you have the nitty gritty of, where do I go from here? Where do I get the expert advice? Because the right wing, they will put their message out there of, look, you need to be like the natural, tough man of the Viking, Spartan era. And we have the program to follow. We have the 9 principles of Viking, Spartan, tough, successful, and fit body. And we have the coaching for you. Just sign up now. You'll see an exemplar on the left, and there isn't really a connection to that, and there isn't really like an ecosystem where you can plug yourself into. There is a good subreddit called r/Swoletariat. I think it gets a little extreme at times in there, but there are some people on the left that are connecting around fitness. But the right wing has a very totalizing ecosystem that'll pull you in. And you don't necessarily see the resources on the left. And I would love to see more people who are progressive getting into the whole coaching space and having regular, consistent engagement on topics around health, fitness, and self-development, sharing their own journeys with a level of vulnerability and relatability, and saying, well, look, I'm not always this tough, mean fighter, like Adam Page did, saying, look, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, sometimes things don't work for me, but I'm still able to push through, and this is how, and these are the problems in society that we need to take a watch out for. And with that reasonable approach, and by giving people good information and improving the quality of fitness information available to the public, I believe is a nonpartisan issue. And by doing that, you'll see young men like, oh yeah, so I learned from influencer XYZ about this program that I'm using in the gym right now, or I'm learning my bulking program from this person, or my cutting program from this person. And then they're saying, well, look, if you're struggling to get your workouts in during the day, and you're dealing with a lot of stress in life, the solution isn't to retreat to the woods and become your ancestral self and become the greatest Spartan warrior ever. The solution is, look at your situation and see why these jobs and your current environment is hindering health and hindering fitness, and organize and work with other people to make a better society for all of us. If you're dealing with financial insecurity, maybe you need to consider the policies that are doing that, and align your voting and civic actions accordingly. Maybe you need to consider unionizing your workplace. Maybe the greatest showing of strength that you have is that you have strength in numbers to unionize your workplace. And it all starts with being able to help people on a practical level, because even in the finance space, and I'm drifting off a little bit, but like the number one like expert that seems to get pushed out there for improving your financial situation is Dave Ramsey, who has very, very conservative ideas. He won't acknowledge that people are being underpaid. He won't acknowledge that minimum wage is too low. He won't acknowledge that there's a shortage of affordable housing. And people are taking his advice, and they're getting some improvements in their situation. And they're like, okay, this guy must be right because he's right on this. He must be right on all these other political things. So creating an ecosystem of outreach and vulnerability, and also showing strong exemplars and showing the journey to that place and the path to success, the path to victory, while uplifting others along the way, and why that's so great, why that's so strong, and why you can be as strong, as tough, as buff as you want to be, and that it's superior. Because there are flaws, there are gaps that I believe that more intellectual, interdisciplinary engagement with people who have more of a focus in social justice, more of a focus in disabilities and differences and cultural differences, people from different racial backgrounds, because you even see Latinos getting roped up into these alt-right people. And as a half Latino young man myself, it's unfortunately pretty sad that people that would oppress you are in fact getting your attention, and you're getting taken in by them. And once that is done, once somebody in a vulnerable situation is able to go and see, oh yes, these are good solutions for me. These solutions don't require me to make myself feel weak. These solutions make me feel strong. And these solutions are working for me in my everyday life. I'm getting practical advice right now, and I'm getting insight for the future for social change and a community that promotes social change. Then not only are the people going to get more help than they would from a Liver King and better help, they're going to be able to create a sustained positive impact in their communities. And I'll talk more about ecosystems. I'm running out of time on this episode, but I'll talk more about creating the left-wing fitness ecosystem and some of my ideas around it on the next episode. So I hope you'll join me for that. Please make sure to subscribe to the Fixer Punk podcast. I am at FixerPunk, FIXERPUNK on Instagram, and on TikTok as well. Make sure you're following both just in case something happens to TikTok, of course. And you can also get some, you'll see a lot of wrestling stuff there too, but also some political stuff there too at my Twitter at Grayson Nation, GREYSONNATION. And if you have any feedback at all, or if you enjoyed this episode in any way, if you want to reach out, if you have any interest in fitness ecosystems and self-help and self-improvement ecosystems on the progressive side, reach out to me by email, grayson@offspeedsolutions.com, or through the contact page on fixerpunk.com as well. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you'll join me next time for the next episode, where we will go more into how we can create these communities and help young men achieve and become the best version of themselves. Thank you so much for your time today.